Howdy folks, 138 MMA here, and I'm going to break down our main event of UFC 287 between Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya. I'm going to cover this whole fight, get into all the nitty-gritty details, cover every little bit of it, but real quick, you can find me on Twitter and Tapology138MMA. You can see my picking percentages, you can see whatever random junk I want to say on Twitter, typically pertaining to MMA because that's the only thing I'd really talk about on there, but you can find all that on those two places. But also, thank you so much to those of you who support me over on patreon.com/138MMA. Your support it means the world to me. It means way more than my words can ever express. Thank you so much. You guys can check that out. It's going to be in the description of the video. Patreon.com/138MMA. Thank you so much. Now let's go ahead and break down this fight, shall we?
You wanted the picks? You got the picks. The hottest picks in the world.
Here we are to break down the main event of the evening. We have Israel Adesanya coming back to try to take his title back against Alex Pereira, who is relatively new to his MMA career, but just beat Adesanya for that title, claimed the victory. The third time he's beaten Adesanya, twice in kickboxing, once in MMA. We all know this. But the guy comes in 5-0 in his last 5 fights. He's 7-1 overall in the career. That one loss was a long time ago. Went back to kickboxing, came back, did some MMA work, did well. For Adesanya, he's 3-2 in his last 5. Those 2 losses, one being to Pereira, obviously, and then the other being to Jan Blachowicz, up a weight class. You can kind of give him a pass in that one. I mean, he was outsized by quite a bit, and it's up a weight class. It's just what happens. So anyway, in this matchup here, both guys are world-class kickboxers. So we have that to go off of here, and it should, in theory, be a kickboxing match. And more or less, it was in the first match. Yes, there was some grappling, but it was more or less a kickboxing matchup. So for this one here, let's go ahead and start by breaking down the former champion in Israel Adesanya. So for Adesanya, obviously that world-class kickboxing, like I mentioned, he's very elusive. He has an excellent control over range and distance from his opponent. And when he's able to do this, he'll put the arms out long, he'll keep them low, using his range, throwing those long, rangy shots, work the leg kick, circle off, pepper with the jab, things like that. He does that very well. We all know him for that. He's able to keep his range, and that's how he kept his title for so long, was he was able to do that and then counter as well. So he can counter with his exceptional reaction time. He's able to counter guys that are coming forward on him, and that's worked for him very well in the past. In fact, we saw it in the first matchup where he was able to counter Pereira at the end of that first round. Thankfully for Pereira, it was the end of the round, and the fight was stopped for the bell. So Adesanya was not able to follow up, but that exceptional reaction time and ability to counter is very important, along with his accuracy. So he's a very accurate striker. Some would say a sniper. I wouldn't fault you for that. That makes sense. But he's able to put his shots just where he needs them to be in order to inflict the most damage. Because he's not the most powerful puncher, but his punches feel powerful. Not from experience, obviously I've never run a punch line, but they look like guys are getting rattled by these, not because he has just heavy power, because he's exceptionally accurate and his reaction time on those counters is there. So for that makes Adesanya very dangerous against a guy like Pereira, as we saw in the first round. However, he's also a stance switcher. So what he can do to keep his opponents guessing is just keep switching stances seamlessly and attack equally well from both stances. Now, he has certain tendencies he does from each stance, but in general, he's able to do exceptionally well from either stance. He'll cut off the cage, so when he's walking forward, which he sometimes does, he used to do it a lot more than he has lately. Lately, he's been using a little more bait and counter, but he used to walk a lot more guys down. We saw that earlier on in his career, in the UFC anyway. But lately, he's been kind of countering people really well, and that's worked great for him. But he can cut off the cage, he can get you up against that fence and start teeing off on you, and then circle off. And then if you back him up against the cage, he can circle off just as well and put you right back to it and then start teeing off. He does that well because he has an excellent spatial awareness more so. He knows where he's at in the octagon at all times, and he's able to capitalize on that. The thing I do like about Adesanya's kicks, particularly, are his teep kicks and his leg kicks. He has good leg kicks. Like we all know, he hits that leg kick, hits the jab, kind of jab leg kick, and gets himself a decision. We understand how that works. But the teep kicks are just as important. He uses them to keep opponents at range because typically he's the taller, longer fighter. Now in this matchup, I don't know about that. It says they're the same height, but I don't know about that. Either way, the teeps are usually very, very successful for Adesanya at keeping people away. So then he can keep hitting with those and then bait them in to kind of bite on that as he goes to feint the teep and then come over the top with a long rangy cross, maybe a jab, something like that. Now, the problem is he keeps his hands low, and that's a problem in his striking, but he usually does that for his grappling defense. So he does have good takedown defense, and a lot of that is because he keeps his hands low. So he's able to keep the hands low, and he's able to use a very solid sprawl because of it, because his hands are already here. He doesn't have to go from here up in this high guard. He doesn't have to come from up here and then get the hands down to stuff the takedown. He's already right here a lot of the time, typically because he's the rangier fighter, so he doesn't have to have that high guard to avoid the strikes. But he's able to stuff that takedown, get that sprawl. Here's the thing. He also reverses takedowns well. In the first matchup between these two, Pereira was the one that shot the takedown that led to Adesanya being on top because he was able to reverse it. It was actually a trip takedown that Adesanya used off of a reversal of Pereira. Now, I think that Adesanya is going to be the better at getting the fight to the mat. Now, when it gets to the mat, we don't know, and we'll cover that in a moment. But at getting the fight to the mat, Adesanya is going to be the better one here, not because he's going to be shooting a ton of takedowns. He might. I don't think like singles and double legs are really his thing. He does a lot more trips from the clinch, but he's good at reversing takedowns. So if Pereira at any point wants to mix in that takedown, you got to watch out because Adesanya is crafty with that. And like I said, those hands being low, it helps. He also threatens with submissions well to create space, whether that's as he's sprawling, he'll threaten with a Darce. If you get him on the mat, he'll threaten with, he'll look for a leg lock or he'll look for, whatever. And he's a triangle, whatever it is. And he uses that to get you to have to play defense then so he can get back up to his feet and start working his offense again. That's what he's used in the past so far. So Adesanya, pretty good grappler overall, but obviously striking is his best bet. And that's going to be the same thing for Pereira. Striking is going to be his best bet because he's a world-class kickboxer as well. He's going to come forward with that forward pressure. And the thing that kind of sets him apart from a lot of people is his KO power. Obviously, he is massive for the middleweight division, which is crazy because middleweight is a pretty big division, but the dude's a giant. The dude should be at 205, and I think he will probably after this fight. I assume if he beats Adesanya twice, he's kind of, I don't need to stay down here. Especially because he knows that there are some stylistic matchups that are not so good for him at 185. So either way, though, that power is going to be a problem for Adesanya. His lead hook is his most deadly weapon. We saw when he dropped Strickland with it, and Strickland usually has a pretty good chin. I know a lot of people are down on Strickland after he got knocked out by Pereira, but that's just silly, dude. This guy hits like a truck. Of course he got dropped by him, okay? And, Strickland hasn't really been rocked since. He's able to, roll with his shots, whatever. So the fact that he was able to put out Strickland with one shot is really impressive. That's a guy that usually has pretty decent striking defense, regardless of what you think of Sean Strickland. I know a lot of people are saying his striking defense is bad because he does the iCarly movement or whatever, but realistically, not a lot of guys are landing clean on him. Pereira did. So he sometimes will throw that hook as a counter, but a lot of times it's also the 2-3. So he'll throw the big heavy cross, trying to take your head off with that, and then come in with this leaping hook, not like leaping, like jumping, but like a big, heavy movement hook, and that's where he gets that big power shot on you. So if he throws that big straight right and it hits, awesome, no big deal, follow up with the hook, already probably on wobbly legs. But if it doesn't hit, he's ready just to launch that hook back up there, and he doesn't really care if it lands flush at that point. He's just trying to land with the impact, and with these small gloves, it's going to likely get through a guard pretty well. So that lead hook is pretty impressive. Now, at range, he'll have a tighter guard when working here. However, something that he does interesting is when he's coming in, he almost Frankensteins in kind of, and I wouldn't like it if he wasn't such a rangy fighter. But in MMA, it works well for him because he's fairly long range, long arms, tall, and he'll start trapping down the hands to set up the knee or that lead hook. Because as he's coming in, he's putting those hands down and hits the big hook or comes in with the knee or the flying knee, depending on the fight. We've seen it a couple of times either way. But the trapping of the hands, it's interesting. It can be countered by Adesanya. That's something I would watch for because Adesanya, he's smart and he watches film. You know that. He's going to be able to say, okay, that is something that he does. And he did to Adesanya in their first matchup, and he was able to use it to some success. I could see Adesanya realizing what he's doing there and then instead countering with his own shot. So something to look out for. But he does it well. Pereira does it pretty well. His knees are absolutely devastating. When he lands them, it's going to hurt, especially because of the way he sets them up. Like I said, he gets your hands away from your face to set up that knee or the flying knee. Now, when he lands that shot, obviously with a big guy like Pereira, everything he throws is going to hurt, just like those leg kicks. They're exceptionally heavy. He was able to compromise Adesanya's leg in the first matchup with those leg kicks, which slowed that movement that Adesanya's kind of known for quite a bit. With the takedown defense, now, it's decent. We haven't seen a lot of it. He seems to do pretty well up against the cage, works the overhook, and gets out of there with that. Overhook, bicep pressure, circle off. generally what he's going to do. Open mat, he struggles a little because his balance is kickboxing. He's able to has a kickboxing balance in his stance. And when you start mixing the grappling, it kind of throws him off a little bit. We saw that because of when Adesanya was able to reverse that takedown on him. His balance just wasn't quite there. And I think that's something that's going to improve over time. This last fight was, 6-7 months ago, something like that. Maybe not quite that long ago. Was it? 5, 6, 7 months ago. Somewhere in that range. Anyway, he probably has improved some of this. He knows that Adesanya is going to try and mix in the grappling. He knows that Adesanya had some success with the grappling by reversing Pereira's takedowns, so he's likely working on it. But the grappling, we don't know much about. Yes, he trains with one of the best grapplers to ever do it in Glover Teixeira. So for that, you would assume that he's getting better in the grappling department. But we just don't know how much. We haven't seen a lot of it in practice. So that is an interesting thing. So when you break this fight down, if you look at it here on paper, you want to lean Adesanya because you're thinking, okay, he has more pass. He should be the better grappler. He should be the better at getting the fight to the mat. Kickboxing, they're pretty dang close, but for whatever reason, anytime they've kickboxed, Pereira came out on top. Although if you watched the one that went to decision, Adesanya kind of got robbed. Either way, in this matchup, though, you think Adesanya should win, but he's just not going to. Why is that? Because Pereira, for whatever reason, just has his number. He's going to get this win simply for the fact that he's going to be able to use the mental tactics that he's already beaten Adesanya 3 times. Adesanya knows he has to win this. And some guys that's going to go really well for. We saw in the last matchup where it didn't quite work out super well for Adesanya. I think Pereira's going to have a little bit more confidence coming in. He's going to have improved because he's still relatively new to the game. Although he's at an older age, he's like 35, 36, something like that. So even though he's older in his age, he's still young in MMA. So a lot of his MMA techniques are still improving quite a bit. And he's got some of the better coaches out there, being Glover Teixeira, one of the best to ever do it. So I think Pereira's getting it done. It's not my most confident pick on the card by any means, but I think he gets it done. He's an underdog right now. He was an underdog last time. I picked against him last time because I did believe that Adesanya won the first kickboxing match, I believe, the one that went to decision. He won that one, as far as I'm concerned. And he was winning the second one until he got knocked out. So I thought, okay, Adesanya's a better kickboxer skill for skill, but sometimes skill for skill doesn't matter when somebody's just got your number and they have the ability to change a fight in an instant. So I'm picking Pereira. Let me know who you guys have because I'm really interested in this matchup. It's a tough one for anybody to predict. But yeah, that's where I'm at. Like this video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. And, thanks so much. See you guys soon.